Hi everyone, this is Tom, and in this video I want to talk about the similarities between your studying program and your workout routine. So both studying and physical exercise to get healthier, stronger, more fit, more endurance, whatever kind of sport you're training for, and studying, whether you're learning for exams, for your job, or any other kind of studying, there's some similarities between the two and some principles that can make both of them more effective, and you can achieve more with both. So I want to go through the similarities between them and why you should kind of treat your study routine like an exercise program, and why that's the most effective way of achieving great exam results. So let's start by talking about what would the workouts look like. So we could think of these as like sessions, study sessions where you're kind of working out your brain and stimulating learning. So we have a study session, but the same principles we're going to go through would apply to a physical workout. So what would be the kind of principles? What would be the similarities? The study session, you're training your brain, and the physical workout, you're training your body. So your muscles, your heart, your endurance, your cardiovascular system and stuff. So there's some similarities between the two here. Firstly, you have kind of dedicated session where you have a dedicated time and place. If you want to optimize your studying, I wouldn't recommend kind of haphazardly just doing a bit of studying here, a bit of studying there. In the same way, if you want to optimize your physical workouts, let's say you're training for a marathon or you're trying to get stronger, you're not going to be, doing a little jog here and then going back the rest of your day, a little jog there. Sure, getting in some extra steps and some extra movement is good, but that's not what's going to give you kind of big muscles or endurance to run a marathon or something like that. You need dedicated workouts, dedicated study sessions. And these study sessions could be for, say, same as a physical workout, half an hour, an hour and a half. So they're intense, dedicated things that you do in a specific time in the day and a specific place. So if you're going to go for a run, you're going to go out to a specific place and run. If you're doing swimming training, you're going to go to the swimming pool and do it there. If you're doing a gym workout, you would go to the gym. Same is true of a study session. If you're going to sit down and study intensely, have a dedicated place and a dedicated time for studying. So you should schedule this in. I don't know about you, but I think it's quite a universal experience that if you don't schedule in like a workout or an exercise program, it just won't happen. If you kind of wait for a convenient time when you feel like it to go and do that workout training, it's unlikely to happen. Same is true of studying. You need to schedule it in and say, I'm dedicating this particular time to studying and prioritizing that over all the other things in life that will just kind of come at you. There'll always be stuff that just kind of comes at you and you have to deal with. But if you schedule it in, you'll make sure it happens. The other thing is having a clear objective. So with your study sessions, I'd recommend really having a clear idea of what you're going to do in that study session. Not just turning up to the library or a coffee shop or wherever you like to study and deciding when you get there, what shall I do? Maybe I'll kind of flick through the book and see what interests me. In the same way with a physical workout, you'll kind of go to the gym saying, today I'm training my legs and I'm going to lift weights and I'm going to do this and have this clear objective. Same thing I'd recommend with studying. Have a clear objective. I'm going to do the study session. This is what I'm going to cover. This is how I'm going to do it. And then when you're there, I have this concept called single tasking. So if you want to get the most out of your workout, when you go and do that workout, you're really focused on the workout. You're not going to be kind of multitasking, chatting with friends, texting, watching something, some kind of video, something like that. Yes, you can kind of mix those things in, but let's say when you're lifting weights, if you're in the middle of a set or you're on an intense run and you're doing, say, a CrossFit workout or something like that, you're not going to be able to do other activities at the same time. Same is true with your study session. You need to be absolutely focused on that, not kind of multitasking and dividing your attention if you want the best results. You can do it, but the best results come from really focusing. So the next principle is, for both of these, you want adequate intensity. So let's say the way that you stimulate growth, whether that's growth of muscles and strength, whether that's growth of your cardiovascular system and endurance to get better at sort of long distance running or swimming or rowing or cycling. The way to stimulate that is you need to add some kind of intensity to the training session, and some kind of progressive overload where you're pushing yourself a little bit further than you were before. So it is the intensity that leads to growth and adaptation. So, for example, if you want to get stronger in doing squats, and when you go to the gym for the first session, you can easily squat your body weight, but you can't squat much with the bar on it. Or a better example would be, let's say you're training biceps and you're doing a bicep curl. When you go to the gym, if you load on 0.5 kilogram and do bicep curls and you only do 5 repetitions, it's barely going to do anything. It's almost like just lifting a cup of coffee. So that lacks intensity, which means your biceps don't have the stimulus to grow and adapt. And so you won't get bigger, stronger biceps. Same is true of studying. If you go and study and you just sit there with a textbook open and your notepad and you're just copying stuff across, it's very low intensity. You're not thinking about it. You're not testing yourself. You're not recalling anything. You're not rearranging the information in a kind of novel, new way. It lacks intensity. So your brain is not going to be stimulated enough to get you to retain the information and actually learn it. Your brain's just going to say, I can do this activity all day long. I don't need to think. It's a kind of mindless activity, and you're not going to learn from it. Whereas if you go into the gym and you push your, say, bicep curls to the point where you really strain and you can only do 6 reps or you can only do 8 reps, and then afterwards your arms are kind of sore, you've had enough intensity where then you go away and rest and the body adapts and your arms grow and you get stronger. Same is true if you go intensely with your study sessions. The whole way through, you're trying to recall stuff from memory. You're trying to push your brain to remember stuff. You're testing your knowledge. You're trying to grapple with complex ideas and present them in a new way. And at the end of it, your brain is sore. You go away and rest, sleep, take some relaxation time. Your subconscious processes it, and those memories are, and that memory and understanding and knowledge is all kind of consolidated, and your ability in that topic grows. So afterwards, you should feel fatigued. I remember when I was studying for my medical school finals, the intensity of my study sessions was such that I would do, say, 3-4 hours of revision in a day, bearing in mind that I'd built that up over time. And my brain was fried. By the end of that 3-4 hours of studying, sometimes less, sometimes even 1 hour, the rest of the day I was wiped out, and I just thought, I can't do any sort of cognitively demanding tasks here because I've pushed my brain hard. And so you should feel fatigued in the same way after a workout. You should feel some fatigue. After a good study session, you should feel some fatigue and the need for some recovery. If you can study for like 12, 16 hours straight, your intensity is probably too low to have actually stimulated any learning. You should feel fatigued, need rest, and when you rest and relax, come back feeling even more your brain is even more powerful. And the way to think of this is, there's this old saying, train hard, play easy. Or I think fighters will say, train hard, fight easy. But the idea is that you're doing difficult study sessions, which makes the exam easy. In fact, if you study properly, when you get to your exam, the exam should be quite fun. You should be feeling like, it's an opportunity to show off all the things you learned. It should actually feel quite easy. You should think, wow, this exam is not as hard as I thought it was going to be. My training sessions are much harder than this. And so the exam should actually be enjoyable. Next principle is you want repeated sessions with progressive overload. So these are kind of, progressive overload is a buzzword. So what does this mean? Well, let's give an example. Let's say you're training, you're doing marathon training, right? That's the exercise kind of analogy here. And another one is you're learning anatomy. So these are the two analogies that we'll compare here. So the first session, where you're sitting down and you're learning, say, the anatomy of the upper limb. The first session for your training, you would do sort of maybe a run, walk, interval. So if you've done like Couch to 5K, you'll know what this means. So let's say you go out for 15, 20 minutes, you run for 5 minutes, or you run for, say, 2 minutes, walk for 3 minutes, and you repeat that for 20 minutes. So it's quite easy. That first session is, just getting your body used to the activity. The same would be true if you're studying the anatomy of the upper limb for the first time. You're learning quite a lot of stuff here, but that first session, what you're just trying to do is get an overview of anatomy. So you're just having a look at, all the muscles, bones, nerves, blood vessels, and so on in the upper limb, and getting an overview, a bigger picture of it, maybe a few details, but you're accepting in the same way you would on that first run session, you wouldn't expect to go out and run like 15 miles in a stretch. That first run session, you expect you're not going to be super fit, but you're going to come back and do more sessions and get more fit. Same way when you're covering cardiology or you're studying anatomy or studying any topic, that first session, you're not going to know everything. It's not going to be a perfect session. You're just going to be covering some of the superficial stuff, some of the basics, and getting an overview of understanding it. And then, say a week later, or sometime later after you've recovered, come back for session 2. This time, you're going to do a short run. Instead of running and walking, this time you go out for a 20-minute run. This time, you're doing more detail on anatomy. So in the same way that you build up those runs, you're also building up the amount of detail and complexity. So then in later sessions, you do longer runs. So you build up that run, you run faster, you run harder, you run longer. And the same way you get increased detail and increased complexity with your study sessions. And this is we're talking about studying, say, one particular topic. So if you're doing maths, this could be like linear algebra. That first session, you're kind of getting an overview, practicing a few problems, not going super detailed. But then the next session, which could be 10 days later or so, You're doing linear algebra again, this time more detail, more complexity, more difficult problems. Then the next session, which will be, say, 3 weeks later, again, more complexity, more detail, more difficult problems. Same way with exercise, you would do progressive overload. So each time pushing a little bit beyond what you did in the last session, making it more difficult. Okay, next principle is stress and rest. There's a great book called Peak Performance, which talks all about stress and rest. And it basically says like the formula for peak performance. So this is for growth, learning, development, getting stronger, getting fitter, anything you want to improve at. The formula is stress plus rest. So what does this look like? Well, if you're doing a workout program, you would do a workout, then you would do rest, then a workout, then rest. Same applies to studying. You need to study, rest, study, rest. And you don't want to just be going all the time. And when I say rest, what do I mean by rest? Rest is not rest is like kind of properly switching off. So sometimes people talk about active rest, or they think that if they're studying now and then the rest of the day they spend working, tidying, childcare, working out, doing other stuff, that other stuff is not rest. Just because it's not studying doesn't mean it's not, doesn't mean it is rest. So you can't fill all your time with constant hard work. Even if those things are different, you do need periods where you kind of completely switch off. You just rest. You're not doing anything that requires lots of discipline. You're not doing anything that requires lots of nervous system to be engaged. You're not doing anything that's wearing you down. You're properly resting and switching off. And that will look different for different people. But doing fun things, being playful, enjoying time with your friends and family, but importantly, not doing activities that are kind of stressful. If spending time with your friends and family, you find that a bit draining, if you're kind of introverted and you get energy from being on your own and having your own space and time, that's important. You want something that leaves you feeling rejuvenated. And a good test of this is, how motivated do you feel after a period of rest? So if you sit back and relax and chill and you spend 2 hours watching a movie, after the movie you kind of feel like, okay, I'm kind of rested enough where I'm a little bit bored and I want something stimulating to do. That's good rest. Again, plenty of sleep, and not exerting discipline during this period of rest. Avoiding stress is difficult, but one key thing I think in the modern world, which is maybe more important than anything else for avoiding stress, is like putting away your means of communication. So that means your phone, social media, emails, messages, all of these things give us a constant source of kind of sympathetic nervous system strain and stress. They're constantly kind of stimulating us. We feel the need to respond. We get kind of like, stimulated by somebody's, comments or whatever it is. These things kind of add this background layer of stress. If you can get rid of those, the rest will be so much more powerful. Even if that's like kind of playing video games, watching movies, hanging out with friends, cooking. Some people find sort of cooking, cleaning, housework, kind of relaxing. These are all great. But anything that kind of gets you stimulated and feeling like you need to respond to things, not such a good source of rest. And you want to kind of balance the intensity and sustainability here. So you're going to be doing these intense study sessions or these intense workouts, and you need to balance that with enough rest that it makes it sustainable. If you're not getting enough rest, you'll burn out. You'll become less motivated. Your intensity will drop. You won't be as effective. So really balancing stress and rest is essential. Next principle is you build capacity over time. So in the same way as with exercise, let's say you're on day 1, and then this is like day 100. On day 1 of doing sort of marathon training or training with weights in the gym, you're not going to go in there and absolutely crush it. You're going to be a bit, say rusty, or you just haven't built up that endurance and that work capacity. So your study sessions may be like 30 minutes per day, and just doing that 3 days per week. And that's because you're a beginner. You're a newbie to the kind of training. So if you go to the gym for the first time and you've never lifted weights in your life, a 30-minute session is going to be quite intense and quite difficult. You probably just need to take it really easy, do 1 or 2 per week, and that's it. And then you build that capacity over time. So by the time you're on day, say 100, you might be doing 3 hours of studying per day, 6 days per week. And in the meantime, you might at some point hit 1 hour per day, and you're doing that 5 days per week. So over time, you're building up your work capacity. Exactly the same way as exercise, your work capacity for intellectual activities and studying is exactly the same. And I've seen this very much in my own life. At this point in my life, my ability and my capacity for doing mentally straining tasks, like making these videos, writing books, etc., is at an all-time high because I've been building for the last 25 years, building up my work capacity. Even now, I sort of cap out at like 6 hours a day. If I do more than 6 hours a day of working, that's not sustainable. Even 6 hours of intense focus is unsustainable long term. I still need plenty of rest built in and days off and so on. So you can build your capacity over time, but be realistic about what you can achieve, especially when you're first starting out. And the final thing is taking a long-term perspective. So what do I mean by this? Well, this is more about the goals of working out and the goals of studying. Really what you're doing is being future-oriented. You're focusing on working now so that you benefit in the future. Going back to that, train hard, play easy. What you're doing now, you're putting in the hard work early on. So you build your capacity, you build your skills, you build your knowledge, and you're looking at the future saying, future me is going to look back and be grateful at the work I put in now. That's true of studying and exercise. The other aspect is delayed gratification. And delayed gratification is a massive predictor of just success in any aspect of life, really. Financially, your studying, your exercise, your health, your relationships, being able to say, I'm going to make decisions now that make things better in the future, is just going to make the future better. And then when your future you comes along, in say 5 years' time, you will be enjoying the benefits of your previous delayed gratification. But at that point, you'll also be delaying gratification for further in the future. So throughout your life, everything will just continue getting better and better and better. if you don't do delayed gratification and you decide today, okay, I'm just going to eat badly, I'm not going to exercise, I'm not going to study, I'm not going to do things that make the future better. You might enjoy it in the moment, but things will get worse throughout life. Things get, progressively worse. So yeah, delayed gratification is important in both. Another thing is patience. Patience is something I've always struggled with. I'm not a particularly patient person. When I look at, all the things I want to do, I've got so many ideas and so many goals that I really want to pursue. The key to patience is to say, okay, I can't do everything at the same time. I can't achieve it all today. I need to take a long-term perspective, do the work now, even though it feels slow and it feels like I'm not making progress. Being patient and trusting the process and knowing, okay, today's workout in the gym doesn't feel like I'm pushing myself. It doesn't feel like I'm making as much progress. I haven't added as much weight as I'd like. I'm not running as far as I'd like. But trusting the process that you do your best today, and then the next session you do a bit better. And you just focus on your objectives, not get distracted, not get impatient, not give up. Just be patient, trust the process, and keep going. Slowly over time, the effects will build and build and build, and you'll look back and think, wow, I've come a long way. Same is true of exercise and studying and anything that you're trying to achieve in life. Another aspect is sustainability. So this is really about looking at your current work capacity, building in stress and rest, and having the appropriate intensity where you can sustain that over the long term. Stress and rest is interesting because you could say, if you're stressed, you're doing a stressful thing in the morning, rest in the afternoon, stressful thing in the morning, rest in the afternoon, and do that on a daily basis. But you may find that there's also a longer time horizon where you say, okay, for this 2-month period, for this semester, I'm going to work really hard, still balancing stress and rest on a day-to-day basis, but doing an intense push. And then you may need to take some weeks off after that intense 2-month period, take some weeks off completely to recover from that kind of longer term stressful period. So you're balancing stress and rest on a daily basis, but also on, say, a monthly or yearly basis. And that's how you kind of sustain it over the long term. And the other thing is consistency. So a lot of these, you'll notice, don't really apply to cramming the week before your exam. You get much better results. In the same way, just before a marathon, you wouldn't go out for the week before your marathon and do like 10-mile runs every day, thinking that's going to help you do the marathon. For training, both physically and for studying, you want to have a consistent, strategic approach over a long term to gradually build things up and do multiple repetitions, multiple training sessions, plenty of rest, and then peak on the exam day or the marathon day, or whether it's a weightlifting competition, swim competition, rowing competition, cycling, whatever physical thing it is. So you want consistency, sustainability, patience, and then peaking when you need to peak. So that's the end of the video. If you want a really nice version of these notes, you can download them on the Zero to Finals Patreon. There's a link in the description. And I'll see you in the next video, which will be tomorrow.